Should we watch Tim Pool try and argue that the Republicans actually won and then just get completely shot down by Milo Yiannopoulos? It's sort of funny to just...
Oh, yeah.
It's not that dramatic, but it is like how desperate Tim Pool is. And we should say, like, just to go over some of these wins. If the Democrats win in Nevada, win in Arizona, which has already been called at least by Wasserman, it's not official in any way, and win in Georgia, which, you know, if I had to bet my kids, college education fund, I would bet right now that they would win those 3 seats. It's going to be the first time, I think, in 100 years that in a midterm election, none of the incumbent parties, with the majority, lost a seat in the Senate. I mean, no incumbent. If Masto and Kelly and Warnock win, no Democratic incumbent senator will have lost, which is unheard of. Mm-hmm. And it is the first time since like 1934 that the party in power hasn't lost a single chamber in state government.
Wow.
I mean, they may lose the House by under 10 seats, which, obviously is not great, but that's teeny tiny in this environment. And so this is really sort of, it's impressive. And what's really important about it, impressive. What's important about it is it edifies the story that progressives were telling within the Democratic Party. But here is Tim Pool trying to argue that Republicans won, and then Milo Yiannopoulos just shuts him down in about 20 seconds. It's really fun to watch Tim Pool come out with a really strong statement, and then when he realizes like he's talking to somebody who knows better, to go like, "Well, you're right about that, though."
Let's talk.
We'll agree to disagree on strategy.
We'll talk about that for the members on the Uncensored, where we can go really off. But let's jump into this first story. Ladies and gentlemen, last night, Republicans won. And then I wake up in the morning and all the conservatives are angry. They're saying that this was an unlosable election and we did so poorly. And I'm seeing all these leftist personalities cheering and screaming like, oh, no red wave. And I'm just like, I don't understand. The Republicans won. Like, they won. They won, and there's likely more winning coming. I get it. Republicans wanted a bloodbath, but instead they got a victory. So now, this is great. Biden says he won't change anything after a successful night for Dems, does intend to run in 2024, and it will be fun watching Don v. Ron taunts press. Okay, he's not going to change anything. That's not the message that people wanted to hear. The message that people want to hear is things are going to get better, but things are bad. And for a variety of reasons, people are willing to vote Democrat, and a variety of really weird reasons, like they voted in the dead guy. But
I don't think people want. I think that people used to be engaged in politics because they wanted to get a glimpse of a better world. But that's the washing powder version of politics. I think people are well into bitterness. I think people want to see the bad guys bleed. I think that people want to see. The bloodbath that you're talking about comes not from a desire to...
Pause it for 1 second. Now, understand that they're talking about Republicans. And I think this is true. I think actually Milo actually has a very good sense of this. Because he ended up being on the wrong end of it. But their entire worldview is own the libs. And they lost the opportunity to own the libs this week. And they got, let's face it, beta.
Yeah. And you also see a window into how they perceive themselves, right? Like, calling them odious or deplorable or racist is not something that makes them upset. They're fine with being the bad guy. They like it because it's a way to own the libs.
Let's keep going here.
I think people want to see the bad guys bleed. I think that people want to see the bloodbath that you're talking about comes not from a desire to reimagine the world in a better way, because I think people are losing hope in that. I think people want to see their antagonists suffer.
I agree.
And the reason for the Republican frustration is that they were expecting a rare moment of catharsis, which is not granted often to people with right of centre politics, a moment in which they could reassure themselves that sometimes justice is done, that the universe is capable of delivering a true justice where it is warranted. And they were robbed of that. So what was stolen from them was not some kind of washing powder commercial glimpse of a better future. What was stolen from them was revenge. Yeah. Because these people don't feel like they've been out of power, and that's a shame. They feel like they articulate their feelings now in very religious terms, and they talk about their enemies in terms of demons, devils, and Satan, and the way in which they express themselves. I think the sunk emotional cost that they had attached to the midterms as a moment when they could reassure themselves that maybe there was, maybe there was still some glimmer of.
But they won.
Well, not really.
But they won what they needed, the House.
No,
what could they have done better? What would they have done?
It was a bog standard or slightly unimpressive midterm in which the usual swing occurred. That is not what Republicans were expecting.
Right. They wanted
not what they were hoping
victory.
for. That's not a victory. When something happens that always happens, that happens whether you campaign or not, that happens whether you do anything or not, that's not a victory. People perceive that as a kind of as a sort of almost like a weather event, it's just part of the natural cycle of things. Yeah. There was no victory because there was nothing above and beyond what the ordinary course of a midterm election.
I understand what you're saying, that they needed something that proved something symbolic and something of meaning.
They just wanted the people who they feel are tearing the fabric of their civilization apart, doing all kinds of things that we'll talk about in the to suffer. They wanted to see the I forget what the Conan quote is. I haven't seen it for 25 years, but they wanted that. Whatever the first bit is, the lamentations of their women. They wanted shrieking. They wanted the 2016 energy.
Right.
They wanted to see liberals panic.
But that's nebulous in the sense that
it's atavistic.
No. Look,
it's atavistic. It's fundamental.
By winning the House, there can now be inquiries, investigations.
Nobody cares about winning the House.
Right. So listen.
Nobody cares about winning the House. The entire Republican base is now
for
at peace
them
with
to
the fact
get
that elections are
the
theater.
retribution, for them to feel the satisfaction is simply their choice. They got what they could get. Now, I suppose they wanted to see a tremendous landslide victory.
They didn't get what they could
get. Which wouldn't have changed anything procedurally. It would have felt good.
No.
Well, I would just say
they didn't get what they could get. They rightly intuit that they were robbed of this victory by people who should have had their backs.
But what's the victory? What does victory look like?
They wanted to see their enemies humiliated.
Right.
And they didn't.
And the only reason they're not being humiliated is because Republicans are acting like they lost.
No. What happened in this election was not only were the leaders in the Republican Party removing spending from some of the most inspirational and popular candidates, which itself is a form of demoralization.
All right. First off, watching Tim Pool try to pretend like he has a clue about any of this stuff. And I mean, the thing I like about this clip is it just shows how lazy Tim Pool is, because none of what he's talking about could he not easily access to just read, I don't know, a dozen articles would give you a sense of the implications of like a 2 or 3 seat House. I mean, because yes, chances are at this point, the Republicans will take the House, but that is also symbolic because Democrats had basically run out of opportunities to pass, any type of meaningful legislation in the Senate, at least in terms of like, the way that it was currently configured. But the Republicans failed, it appears, to take back the Senate. That is a huge, they could not pick up 1 seat in the Senate. That is an incredible loss. And the stakes are huge. I mean, the stakes are really, really big. Now, again, Democrats could lose the Senate. I mean, theoretically, they could win the House, but let's just assume for a moment that they've lost the House and that they're going to retain the Senate. That is a huge, huge loss. The party out of power that you couldn't pick up one Senate seat. I mean, that's really stunning. And really, they also were rebuked in terms of like all of these ballot measures. I mean, across the board, in terms of abortion, largely speaking, and in terms of like decriminalizing marijuana, and in terms of like, I mean, they lost state houses. Michigan is now all Democratic. That's stunning. You've got trifectas in Massachusetts and Maryland. You've got, I mean, Democrats had, they didn't lose a single state house that they had, and they gained. I mean, this is, by any accounts, this is a loss. And really, if you adjust for like that secular thing that Milo was talking about, it's a pretty substantial loss.
It's just stunning to me how Tim Pool can cover politics every day and speak with such conviction, and yet have like honestly, it's not even just not having any idea. It's like the takes are so surface level and vapid as well. Like there's conviction, but excitement about the complete vacuousness of his own mind.
That's audience service, right? Like Tim Bon Toast did a really good piece on Tim Pool, calling him the milquetoast fence sitter, which Tim Pool likes to position himself as he dispenses the right everything they want to hear, and that flatters their sort of biases and things like that.
And then he can provide with an alternative narrative here, because literally everybody in conservative media, except for the exception of Greg Gutfeld, I saw him say on the 5 yesterday that he was like, I don't know what people are complaining about. Like, the Republicans won the House. I didn't think we'd win the Senate, right? That's the only conservative pundit that I've seen who has had anything positive to say. So, like, Tim Pool's providing counter-programming for his audience.
Yeah, and I mean, we could just...
And didn't get away with it because Milo was just like, you don't know what you're talking about.
Here's just one of many clips of Tim Pool prognosticating the 2020 election.
Donald Trump of a massive 49-state landslide. Now, you're probably saying, Tim, by what metric could you even possibly predict Trump getting a 49-state landslide? And it's actually a good point. There's no real hard data. Donald Trump.
Okay. Yeah. Well, there you go. Yeah, there is no real hard data. It's just like something's growing underneath my beanie. But we should also add that aside from him trying to, I don't know, pretend that somehow this was a victory, he also seems to like have he says procedural. The guy seems to have absolutely no sense of like how politics exists. Like, there's a big difference between having a 25 person majority in your control of the House and a 2-person majority, because it's hard to get 220 or whatever the number is going to end up being. You need maybe 218, maybe it's 219 to get them to agree to something, particularly when you have no people to spare to disagree with you. And it's going to give control. I mean, so it's going to be extremely hard for the Republicans to do anything on some level, because they have such a thin majority in the House. To cover politics and not understand the difference between having a big majority or a tiny majority and how hard that is again, this guy. I don't even know what. It's just so funny to watch him get schooled by Milo Yiannopoulos. And it's also, what is that really Milo? Does he have now like a Scottish accent?
I honestly, I was first of all, I didn't really recognize him, and I couldn't tell who was talking because I didn't recognize that as Milo's voice. Maybe it's just been a while.
But then you kind of got the British vibes when he kept saying washing powder.
Yeah, no. There was an accent, but it sounded almost like Welsh or Scott. Maybe he is Scottish, but like it didn't sound like his accent. His accent was a lot more sort of effete before, I think.